complete day-to-day tasks creatively. We're basing today's discussion on this amazing self-help book I read a few years ago called Managing Your Day-to-Day by Justin Lee. This was a pretty short read, but I found numerous really interesting productivity and mindfulness tricks here that I shared successfully, which is why we thought it would make sense for us to talk about this book in our Sunday sessions. We will discuss 3 ways to complete your daily tasks creatively. Before we actually do that, let's talk about tasks that need us to be creative, right? Especially tasks at work that are intensive and also creative, right? They need us to work on them in an intense way. They might need lots of focus, they might need lots of hours, days, and they might need lots of creativity in its different ways throughout the course that we work on these tasks, right? So I think what separates intensive tasks that are also creative from the ones that are only intensive is, right, of course, that they're creative, and that these creative tasks, I think, they don't have as many guidelines. Some of them might not have any guidelines. If your creative task is something really innovative, right, they might not have any guidelines. And because they might, and on the flip side, right, they don't have too many guidelines for you. They also don't have too many guardrails for you. As a result, you can take this creative endeavor, this intense creative endeavor, in whatever direction you might please, right? So your effort might lead to something really creative, really innovative, or it might lead to something that might not be too relevant, right? And for me, a creative endeavor, a sort of intensive creative endeavor for me, for all of us at Vistara Circle, right, is deciding what book, what course should we present across all of our different sessions, right? Because we decide this much in advance, and we work on the outlines of our courses also in advance, right? So that all of our sessions, they're coherent, right? So that's sort of an intensive creative task that doesn't have too many guidelines. It also doesn't have too many guardrails. We don't have a manual or like a list of to-dos for this task, right? So I think that's what separates these creative tasks from the ones that are not too creative, right? Like maybe let's say getting gas in my car. I know that's something I need to do if I want to drive my car. It's not creative though, right? It's just a task that I just go about doing. Okay, so coming back to create intensive tasks that are also creative. So what do they need of us? I think they definitely need willpower on our part, right? Of course, apart from willpower, they need us to be creative, right? But I think that's where the trick is. I think creativity is kind of like any other physical human trait we have, right? Like let's say like eyesight or like muscular strength, right? So let's say it's snow today, so I shoveled and I used the snow blower for a long time, or I exercised much longer today than I usually do. So because of these activities, now I need to rest my muscles longer than I usually do, right? Because they're tired now. So creativity kind of works the same way. It is like one of some of the other many other human tendencies we have, which is why we can use it. But then if we use it for a long time, we also need to rest ourselves. And kind of again, like muscular strength or vision, even when we stop using it, we don't completely turn it off, right? So even if I stop shoveling ice, or even if I do stop working out, that doesn't mean the muscles in my arms and my body are like turned off, right? They're still being used, but they're not used as intently and as intensively as they were when I was exercising, let's say, right? And same goes for creativity. Creativity is an inherent human trait that I think all of us in our own ways exhibit, right? The job titles we do, they might not have creativity in their job description, but in our own ways, I think we are creative on the job and off it. Okay, so let's read some interesting quotes about creativity from this book. Successful creative people, they constantly lay the groundwork for ideas to germinate and evolve. So people who are successfully creative, they're always trying to connect the dots, especially dots connecting the dots across events or subjects that might not seem to be related, especially somebody who from the outside, somebody who might not be as creatively inclined in those specific fields. So a great example of this, as I was putting this deck together, was a sports shoe, a sneaker that one of the sports accessories manufacturers they made, I think last year. So this brand, this sports shoe maker, they had a person in their workshop who was handicapped in some way. They were physically disabled. They had a physical disability. So their colleagues, they realized this person who's actually designing and making the shoe, they can't wear that shoe because of the physical disability. So their their friends and their colleagues, they actually designed a shoe for this person, which they can wear, they can wear and take off without using their hands. So let's say these are my 2 feet, right? I hope you can see my hands. So, right, if these are my 2 feet and if I'm wearing shoes right now, the way I would remove that particular shoe is by just using my toe, just by like pressing my toe on the other feet. And if I once I press my toe, I just remove my foot from that shoe, it just comes off, right? Kind of how a lot of us already do, right? We already remove our shoes kind of like this if when we're in a hurry, right? But the magic here is when you remove your shoe that way, when you remove your feet from your shoe, the shoe goes to like a position like this, like it folds up, right? And it gets ready for you the next time you want to step into these shoes. So the next time you just step into this shoe and you put your weight on it, the shoe like clamps itself around your feet. And now you're wearing those shoes and they don't come off while you're running or while you're walking. Right? And again, you just take them off just like that. So right, so these people, they connected their friend's disability with their ability to create sports shoes. And they also look colorful and nice, right? So an example of how these creative people connected the dots across two subjects or two principles that maybe I wouldn't be able to connect, right? Another quote. Everybody that does creative work has figured out how to deal with their own demons to get their work done. Okay, so the way I interpret this quote, I like to refer to demons, I like to call it something else. I just call it a personality trait. An example, I love doing nothing. So like my best idea of a Saturday morning or like a weekday evening is doing nothing. So I'm really happy like sitting here on this couch just staring in my backyard for like an hour, 2 hours even, just staring at the trees. And I really enjoy doing it. But if I felt like doing that, let's say on a Monday afternoon, that would be problematic for me, right? And in that case, I'd feel demonized by my personality trait. So I think that's what this quote says. So what I take from this quote is people who do creative work, they they know about their personality traits. They're in touch with their personality traits. And because they know how to deal with them so that they can use these traits for their own benefit and so that they can make sure these personality traits don't actually obstruct them. Okay? So I'd like to take a little tangent away from creativity and talk about Jordan. Jordan's a 7 month old golden doodle. He's a puppy that my friends got, when he was like tiny, and now he's much bigger. He looks like a big dog, but he's only a puppy. He's 7 months old, so he's a baby in his mind, and he loves to play, and he's one of the best behaved dogs I know. I think he's actually one of the best behaved beings I know because he's like really gentle, really calm, loving, very independent. He won't bother you unless he has to go outside, to be. And yeah, if you play with him, he's gonna give you all his attention and his love. And yeah, like he can walk with you on the road without being on a leash. He won't bother anybody else. He won't put himself in danger or anybody else by like running up to cars. He's just nice. Also very cute. Reason why I decided to mention him is because of my favorite insight from this book, which is wandering like a cloud. So Jordan to me is like a fluffy little cloud, and he does wander like a cloud. And right, if you let him. So coming back to creativity, Jocelyn Glee says, giving yourself time to daydream is really important because when you do that, that is when when you rest yourself, when you let your creativity rest. And just like your muscles, even when you're resting, your creativity isn't actually resting. It's just that you actively stop using it for something. And when you do that, when you take a break, you let your subconscious mind tap into situations that you weren't exactly aware of. And when you do this, you start realizing ideas, let's say tangible ideas like this sneaker that you can wear without using your hands, right? And I'll say this sneaker is not only helpful for those with disability, but for anybody else. Like I'd love to wear my sneakers, take them off without using my hands, right? So when we take a break away from the tasks that we have, we let subconscious kind of like take a stroll like Jordan does. We let ourselves think of tangible solutions like this sneaker, like this idea of connecting these dots. I also think we let ourselves think of intangible ways of operating creatively. An example could be, right, if I'm just, daydreaming, I might realize, hey, I really obsess about the details of a creative pursuit before actually working on it. And I just realized I worked on something. Let's say, I don't know, I potted this plant in its little jar, and I realized I could figure out the details as I go about it. I don't have to know everything before actually doing it, right? And if I actually try to know everything before I do something creative without the practical exposure, I actually end up spending more time than I would have, right? So I got in touch with this intangible yet very significant attitude of creativity, right? Because I let myself daydream, right? And that lastly, this daydreaming, this taking breaks, it also is really useful if while we're taking a break, we just practice some unnecessary creation. Some of you that might know me, I like photography. I like to take photos. And there are days when I take even hundreds of photos on like a usual day, which is why I also try to limit that, right? I try to take a break. So I tell myself, hey, I'm not going to carry my camera today. I'm not going to use my phone today. But at other times, I saw Jordan. It was a nice sunny day. There were birds. I noticed the light has already started to look a lot like it's spring already. So I let myself, practice unnecessary creation. I took a few pictures of Jordan, and while putting this deck together, I felt like, okay, maybe some people might enjoy looking at Jordan. Okay, so let's move on to the next insight. Defining finish from the start. Now, this is a technique I think that has been mentioned across several different self-help books. The first I read about this was in another amazing self-help book that I love. I think that's the first book I ever read, a first self-help book I read as a child, Seven Habits of Effective People by Stephen Covey. I think the second habit in that book is you should define finish from the start, and that's going to help you. And Stephen Covey, also Jocelyn Lee, they say it's going to help you because it lets you use the power of affirmations, right? So if I can think of something before I actually start creating it, that in a way makes me feel good that, hey, if it exists here, there's a higher chance of existing in the real world, right? And as I'm thinking about it, as I'm affirming to myself, I also let myself, strategize as to how I'm going to go about it and what I'm going to do, right? I might realize, okay, I want to, pot this plant the best way possible, but I don't have too much time. And I know the stores are closed, so let me use a jar that's lying at home, right? Just an example. So defining finish from the start helps you use the power of affirmations. I think it also helps us use the power of auto-suggestion because we are, in a way, thinking about something that we're going to create, right? But if we can't even think about it, how are we going to create it, right? So when I'm defining finish from the start, I'm using the power of auto-suggestion. I'm being more familiar with my invention, with my idea, before I actually create it. So when I actually do create it, I'm already familiar with it, right? I already know my way around it. The way to use this the best way possible to actually help you get work done is by setting smarter goals. By smart goals, let me start with smart goals. This is something we've already discussed. We'll paste a link to a related video in the social platforms that we had a few months ago where we talk about innovation. And I think the same rules, principles apply here as well, which is by using SMART goals, right? Goals which are specific, goals which are measurable, achievable. So we are very specific of what we want to create. We have a way of measuring our progress, right? And we make sure that it's something that I can achieve, right? Apart from all of that, these goals are realistic. The R and the smarter is for realistic. So I'm making sure that my goal is realistic and that it's also timely, right? So let's say I have to work on something. Again, this deck, I know it's going to take me 2 hours to make it, to practice it. And right, so if I do have that time, I'm going to do that, right? If I don't have that amount of time, what's the other way I can go about it, right? So it's a realistic and a timely goal for me. And the way you can make smart goals smarter, the E and R in the end stand for evaluate and revisit, right? So let's say I went about a smart goal and I felt like, okay, I could change some things about it. And so I evaluate it and then I decide to change something about it and then I go about doing it. So that makes smart goals smarter. And using smart goals for defining finish from the start and defining finish from the start, both of these techniques, they help you with one of the biggest creative pitfalls, which is committing too much without knowing enough. So when you do these two things, you prevent yourself from promising yourself too much. Okay. So last takeaway, right? For people, who are again in creative pursuits, it's very important to get to the source of your inspiration. Now, there are motivations or reasons as to why we do things, why we do most things. And that's especially true for things that are intensive and creative in nature, right? So, like I said, like getting gas, that's a pretty rote thing I do, right? And my reason for doing that, yeah, is just because I can drive my car or I can drive to that place I like, right? But then for something else, let's say like I have these French windows in my living room, but sometimes when I'm hanging out here, like I take a nap in the afternoon, they're way too bright because it's a south-facing room, right? So like I get flooded with sunlight here. So I had to come up with some creative way to make sure that I don't get flooded with sunlight, but that I still have daylight in this room, right? So I did have a motivation and a reason, but I also had an inspiration. I wanted to retain the light, but make sure it doesn't like, bother me. Along with inspiration, right? Along with having some source of inspiration or some reason of why we're doing things, we also always have some sort of limitations. And being aware of those limitations also helps us. Matter of fact, the author, she studied several inventions over the past few centuries, and she studied their inventors, people who were responsible for these inventive items, things that have helped humanity, or even techniques of operation. And she found out these people, they were very in touch with their inspirations, with their motivations, and also their limitations. And she said these people, like, they loved their limitations in some ways. Like she gave some examples of some artists, like people that made music, or like artists who starred in movies, or like they directed movies. And she quoted their speeches after getting awards or like accolades for their creations. And they said they did it because of a certain loved one. So what they really meant is they had an experience, right? Like an emotional, spiritual experience with somebody that they loved. And they wanted to transform that into something tangible, a movie or a music album. And so they went ahead and did it, right? And not only as an act of loving their source of inspiration, but also in some way accepting their limitation. So the third point of this chart, the base of using your inspirations and your limitations is loving them. Now it might not be possible for us to love our limitations, in which case it's fine. As long as we are aware of them, we embrace them, even if we don't exactly love them. We might not prefer them, but hey, we all have limitations. So let me just be aware of them. Let me just embrace it. And when I do that, I let my unique sources of inspirations and my unique limitations put me in an extremely limited, a niche perspective, a niche category to actually create that invention. Right? Again, so that example of the shoe, examples of like, so artists have like created new genres of music this way because they had their unique sources of inspirations and they had their unique sources of limitations. And I'm so glad they did that. They had those limitations and their inspirations because now humanity has another new genre of music or another new category of movie making. Just some examples that the author shared. So we're gonna post a link to another session we had a few months ago about innovating, and I think we spoke about some things that we discussed today, I think in more detail. So we're gonna paste it in the chat for you if you like. That's the end of our self-development talk. Thank you for being with us. Please visit us at our website for other sessions we had. We have recordings of our sessions from the past. And I'm gonna open up to the discussion. So Radha and I, we're gonna be live, and you can put your comments and we'll read them out and we'll discuss them.
Yeah, thank you, Apurva. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. There's a lot to talk about with creativity. As you were sharing, what was coming to mind was this quote by Elizabeth Gilbert, who says that everybody's creative. You know, I think that we give special credence to, you know, people who are doing it professionally, or they devote a lot of their time to the creativity. But the reality is that every person is creative. There is some sort of creativity inherent in everybody, from the way that you style your hair, or the clothes that you're selecting for yourself, or, you know, the way that you dance, even if it's looks very awkward, or, you know what I mean? Like, everybody has creativity. So that's something that came to mind for me. And then also that importance of taking breaks. It's so hard for me. I'm a very practical person, and I just keep doing all the time. A friend of mine continues to say to me, you're the busiest person that I know during this pandemic. Like, for most people, their life is really slowed down, and they're not doing that much, and they don't have a lot of things on their schedule to-do list. Total opposite for me. I have so many Zoom calls, walks, you know, like this thing here, that thing there. I'm not taking breaks. This thing here, I'm not taking any breaks. And so, and like similarly with creativity, that it's very rare for me to take a break and to say, hey, it's okay that you don't actually have to create something for public consumption. Sometimes you could just do some drawing for your own self, because for those of you who do not know, I'm a professional writer. So that's what I'm doing all of the time. And it's rare for me to write something just for me. So that's what I got out of what you were sharing tonight. And I would love to hear other people's thoughts about creativity and anything that they're going to take away from this session tonight. Go ahead and type it into the chat, and we will read it out.